At its historical height, the civilization of ancient Egypt controlled not just its Nile Delta heartland, but parts of the Levant and the Maghreb as well. As a historically diverse empire, home to many different peoples, cultures, and languages, the Egyptian state was prone to racial stereotyping, bias, and prejudice. Over its many millennia of existence, the ancient Egyptian conception of race and identity evolved drastically, yet remained fundamentally different from our modern conceptions of ethnicity and race. Welcome to our third episode on ethnicity and race in the ancient world, where we discuss race and ethnicity in Egypt, whether they existed as we understand them today, and how these developed in relation to social phenomena. Every week we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment. To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job. Before we begin, we must clarify a few things. Firstly, the study of race and ethnicity in ancient Egypt is far less developed than the study of race and ethnicity in ancient Greece or Rome. As such, we have less information to go on, resulting in a video that relies more on speculation than documented historical fact. Secondly, we will discuss these regions at various points of their history. For Egypt, we will look at elite depictions in iconography and art, from the earliest parts of Egypt's history to the rule by the Greek pharaohs in the Ptolemaic period. The former show us how Egyptians treated other ethnicities when they were rulers of an empire, and the latter are indicative of how they dealt with being ruled by others. With these things in mind, let's begin our exploration. Ancient Egypt's conceptions of ethnicity are hard to untangle because a lot of their iconography and writing are tied to royal ideology. This means that what little we know is based around how pharaohs and their henchmen perceived the world around them, and does not take into account the opinions of ancient Egypt's common peoples. In terms of scriptural evidence, we have no texts that show any form of biological or ecological determinism, ergo the racist idea that people have inherent characteristics based on biology or climate present in the attitudes of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. There are, however, some indications of othering people based on their distinct ethnicity in art. For instance, ancient Egyptian artwork often depicts other peoples with different skin colors to portray that they were different from Egyptians. The Nubians were depicted with black skin, the Libyans with white skin, and people from West Asia with yellowish skin. These are stereotypical images which were created to distinguish foreigners who came to Egypt from the local Egyptians. However, the plot thickens when we realize that Cretans and Greeks in ancient Egyptian artwork were depicted with a reddish skin color, much like Egyptians themselves were. Thus, skin may have been a signifier of difference, but not necessarily an indication of people being lesser. Egyptian imperial and colonial ideology was manifested through mythology, especially the presence of gods in other lands. Egypt's own mythology gave itself special provenance to the Nile, whose origins lay south of the country itself. According to some historians, this implies that the Egyptians felt some affinity with their African neighbors, such as the Nubians. Other gods, like Horus, were said to dwell in Crete, an example of an Egyptian god living abroad. Egyptian mythology also assigned some divine connotation to different parts of the world. For instance, Set, the god of mischief and usurper of Osiris's throne, is said to have dwelt in the deserts of the west. This is firmly Libyan territory, which Egyptian propaganda claimed was a barbaric and backward land. The same can be said of Amun, the creator god, whose major cultic centers could be found south of the Egyptian heartland in the land of the Nubians. This meant that in the Egyptian worldview, the whole world, not just Egypt, was under the influence of the Egyptian gods. This may have had ethnic connotations, but it equally explains the presence of Nubian and Libyan dynasties in the Third Intermediate period of 1077 to 664 BCE, because they both had contact with Egypt, and could use these deities to make themselves be seen as legitimate pharaohs. Thus, Egyptian mythology linked other lands to Egypt itself as the center of the universe, with its people at the top. However, this hierarchy was upended during times like the Third Intermediate period. In the religious text called Hymn to Aten, suggests that it is the sun disk who distributed different skin colors and languages amongst peoples, as exemplified in this verse. You created the world in your fashion, you alone, this world of men, of herds, and of wild beasts, of all that is on the earth and walks on legs, of all that is in the air and flies with wings outstretched, of all the foreign lands, from Syria to Nubia and the land of Egypt. You set every man in his place, you supplied their necessities. Everyone has his food, and his time of life is reckoned. Their tongues are separate in speech, and their natures as well. Their skins are distinguished, as you distinguished the foreign peoples. The hymn does not seem to put people into hierarchies, but it does essentialize their language and habits. Other texts are more prejudiced in this regard. In the Prophecy of Neferti, which can be traced back to the Middle Kingdom, Near Easterners are depicted as violent and brutal towards Egypt. Both of these texts are from specific historical moments, and so cannot be applied broadly to ancient Egyptian society as a whole. However, they show that the ethnicity of the other could be a useful political tool. Some interesting insights on Egyptian notions of ethnicity can be gleaned from ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, one of which is consistently used to depict foreigners in inscriptions. That symbol is the 9 bows. This symbol was a metaphor for the endless and countless foreign territories which surrounded Egypt. Some have speculated that the 9 bows, being a symbol of war and destruction, also meant that they were seen as agents of chaos. This is because Egyptian rulers considered themselves to rule over a land of cosmic order, and thus anything outside it was seen as barbaric. Given that hieroglyphics were seen as a divine language, this symbol may have given divine sanction to these opinions. While the 9 bows logogram refers generically to all foreigners, there are hieroglyphics and names that show specific groups, such as the word Amu, which refers to people from West Asia. These groups were often seen as enemies and linked to Egyptian war propaganda. Other hieroglyphics, like that for enemy, which shows a man with his hands tied behind his back, are also sometimes used for foreigners. This is a subtle indication of foreign peoples being seen as only worthy of conquest and subjugation. Egyptian imperialism is the most important factor in how other peoples were othered, as it gave the motivation and propaganda used to make conquered and enemy peoples be seen as inferior. This mainly manifested itself in propaganda against other peoples. For instance, Ramses II's inscriptions describe the Levantine and Nubian subjects of the empire as wretched. While not necessarily having biological connotations, these inscriptions are very much intended to dehumanize others. They also serve to exalt the rulers who made these inscriptions as undefeated and indestructible. This hieroglyphic metaphor is a double function that was important for the absolutist Egyptian state to maintain its legitimacy. Texts dealing with wars in the Middle Kingdom are also very militaristic for this very reason. Both Levantines and Nubians are accused of fighting dishonorably in inscriptions like those commissioned by the pharaoh Senwosret III. However, other texts show a more complex picture. One such tale is the tale of Sinuhe, in which the homonymous protagonist Sinuhe flees Egypt to live in Asia before his return to Egypt. This story exudes a theme of nostalgia, not unlike the one in the Odyssey. Sinuhe longs to go home and hopes to be buried there so his family back home can help him in the afterlife with offerings. However, Sinuhe blends into Asiatic identity through cultural behavior due to living there on occasion in the story. His return to Egypt to be buried shows the importance the country held for Egyptians at the time. This is partially due to the sanctity of Egypt and its empire as a beacon of order in a chaotic world. It also shows that ethnic boundaries were always fluid, even if propaganda tries to dehumanize non-Egyptians. Egyptian attitudes to race and ethnicity are best seen through their interaction with conquered peoples like the Nubians. Egypt's conquest of Nubia likely revolved around the strategic control of resources and local elites. This is evident in the burial complex of Tombos in modern-day Sudan. Some of the burials include coffins in the New Kingdom style, which includes the Shepti figures, clay idols said to be able to come alive and serve the dead. These are distinctly Egyptian practices, as Nubians did not participate in burials of this style. However, major pottery finds exist in most tombs, unlike fancy Egyptian tomb relics. Archaeologists have also discovered 4 tombs of women, which are determined to be in the Nubian style because of the bowls found therein and the orientation of the burials facing north. The Egyptians also took local nobles as hostages and taught them to be Egyptian in order to administer the empire as local interlocutors. If one takes a look at the tombs of such elites in Lower Nubia, we see a mixture of traits appearing in them. Some, like sarcophagi, are purely Egyptian. Others, like the presence of artifacts related to the Nubian sacred animals of cows and bulls, show a Nubian identity. It thus seems that these elites were not seen as either fully Egyptian or fully Nubian. Another such example of hybridity is the sarcophagus of Ashiet, a priestess of the goddess Hathor from the end of the 21st century BCE, which was found in Deir el-Bahari. Hathor is a fertility deity linked to bovines, and her priestess is depicted in stereotypical Nubian fashion with black skin. According to the Egyptologist Kate Liska, her sarcophagus has a specific female formula that provides advice and magical means for people to pass safely to the afterlife, a typical Egyptian habit. As a Hathor priestess, being of non-Egyptian origin would likely have been of great benefit to Ashiet, as it showed that the goddess was famous among many peoples and cultures. Ashiet still shows some non-Egyptian traits despite being fully integrated into Egyptian religious life. Her tomb inscription also showcases her scribes and medjes, some of whom were also likely Nubian. These inscriptions also depict her elite household status and status as a woman. This is a testament to the fact that despite the various forms of prejudice that appear in Egyptian art and iconography, coexistence was possible. Throughout history, Egyptian worldviews on identity and race were often shattered. First with the attacks from the Sea Peoples during the Bronze Age collapse, and then with the conquest of the Libyan and Nubian dynasties, in which the Egyptians found themselves ruled by non-Egyptians. Later, other non-Egyptian peoples would enter the Nile Delta and conquer the land of the pharaohs, namely the Achaemenid Persians and later the Macedonian Greeks. The Egyptians detested the Persians and launched several revolts against them, but things were more complicated with the Greeks. This is because, unlike the Persians, the Greek Ptolemy family that took ownership of Egypt after Alexander's death was situated in Egypt itself, making it a somewhat native and local dynasty. Indeed, Alexander presented himself as a liberator of the Egyptian people when he seized the land from the Persian king. The Ptolemies had a twofold agenda. They sought to control Egypt and maintain the legitimacy of their rule over that ancient land in which they were newcomers. Thus, they used Greek culture and language as a marker of who was elite and who was not, while also moving settlers from Hellas itself. This brought them into conflict with the Egyptian deep state, the temple bureaucracy. Let us use the example of a businesswoman called Apollonia. Apollonia was a Cyrenian woman who married a Macedonian soldier in Egypt, so we'll see how different legal statuses worked in Ptolemaic Egypt. To Apollonia, ethnicity was fluid, and she could be both Greek and Egyptian depending on what benefited her most at the time. When using her Egyptian legal status, she could run a small business. She is later shown using Greek legal status on other occasions, such as interacting with state officials, giving her rights as a quasi-citizen that Egyptians were not afforded. Apollonia did this for a specific reason. If she had used only the privileged Greek woman status, she would not have been able to actually own her business. This is because Ptolemaic Egypt had ethnicized legal statuses, in which different ethnic groups were beholden to different laws and standards. However, over time, as concessions were made, boundaries became more fluid, and people could jump between these statuses as intermarriage increased. Even the Ptolemies themselves gradually Egyptianized during their 3-century rule over Egypt, going from using exclusively Greek art styles to embracing native Egyptian art. Thus, Egypt in the Ptolemaic period was a place of ethnic segregation, but also a place of fluid notions of ethnicity. This contradiction made things complex in everyday life. So how did the Egyptians respond to this domination? We know that there were various cases of Egyptian resistance through the temple bureaucracy. There are some texts that show this in more detail. One is the Alexander Romance, whose origins are likely Egyptian. In it, Alexander the Great is shown as the son of Olympius and the Egyptian magician Nectanebo while transformed into a snake. This is a sort of nativist Egyptian attempt to co-opt the Hellene who conquered them into being one of their own. We also, however, have examples of coexistence in the so-called Greco-Egyptian magical papyri. These papyri, which date to the Roman period, have influences from Christian, Jewish and Gnostic cultures, as well as multiple polytheistic influences from Egypt, Greece and the Near East. They revolve around mundane affairs, like cursing one's boss or making someone love you. The invocations to various pantheons suggest a lack of interest in ethnic superiority and an emphasis on using whatever could supernaturally work. Thus, we see that coexistence was possible, and indeed it did function in some spheres of Greco-Roman Egyptian life, but also that constant prejudice formed colonial tensions between Greek and Egyptian. As we have seen, the Egyptians' view of race and ethnicity was informed by both their unique religious views as well as the ideological fervor perpetuated by the imperial agenda of their ruling pharaohs. While they were as capable of propaganda-fueled prejudice as any other civilization, they were also capable of harmonious coexistence with neighboring peoples. While these have not influenced our conceptions of ethnicity like Greece and Rome might have, they are nevertheless important aspects of world history, and for how these processes unfold and how they help states continue to rule over a people. Indeed, Egypt's hieroglyphs and inscriptions calling for total domination of other people are eerily reminiscent of dehumanizing propaganda we see today. Given how elitist and rigid these societies were, it is difficult to know how much these views were shared by the average Gilgamesh or average Osiris. Nevertheless, they are stark reminders that ethnicity and race can be political tools that allow empires to maintain control over peoples, and how these shape the very peoples that they rule, whether seen as us or whether vilified as them. More videos like this are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.